they think like, okay, well, there's a time in which I lose or there's a time in which I'm losing. But really, if you think about things in an infinite strategy, there is no winning or there's no losing, right? And growing up, I could also see like what I didn't want to be like as an adult. We all have our own relationship with money, and there's not necessarily a right or wrong relationship with it. Every dollar that you deploy, especially in business, needs to have a predetermined.
Hi, everyone. This is Jack Allwild with another money episode. Today, we have very special guest, Scott Todd. He's the author of Fix This Next for real estate investors, and he's got a great framework for identifying and addressing your business's most pressing need. And he was my instructor in flight school. So, Scott Todd, welcome to the show.
Thanks, man. How are you?
I'm doing great.
Very good.
So, before we get into your framework for addressing our most pressing needs, I do like to start off the show by asking, what was your relationship like with money growing up?
That's a great question. So, it was, growing up, my mom was a single mom. I saw my dad on the weekends. They were divorced. My mom was a state employee. She got paid once a month. Okay, once a month, the last day of the month. And so she always had to squeeze out everything and manage it. And there were so many times where we'd get toward the end of the month and things got a little tight, right? So it was always one that growing up is from my mom's perspective, it was always something that um, I could see how she could stretch the budget, and I never really understood that because I'm one of the favorite stories she would tell you is that I asked her for something one day and she's like, we just don't have the money for that. And I'm like, I don't understand. We have checks. You have checks. Just write a check. And she's like, yeah, that's not the way that it would work. Now, on the other hand, my dad, my dad had an interesting relationship with money, and I did not want to repeat that. Like my dad, he did well financially in terms of he had a manager job. He was a white collar, manager. He did well, but he also spent well too. And so he had credit card debt like a lot of people do, and he would spend money. And I remember I was like 17 years old. I was in Home Depot with my dad and my little sister. And I said to her, I said, when I grow up, I'm not going to put stuff on credit cards. I'm going to pay cash. Now, 7 years old, you know what she did, right? She went and told dad. He said he's not going to be like you. He's going to have like money. He's going to put everything on a credit card. And, it upset my dad a little bit, but it was never really a dig on him. It was just, I got to see two different lifestyles, if you will. Somebody who was not necessarily spending money, not putting things on credit card just because there was no means to pay for it. And then to see someone who almost like leveraged credit cards to a fault, but then, struggled to pay. I mean, he paid his bills. He had great credit, my dad did, but it was always like he was always paying the credit card company, right? And so I always knew like I could see the extremes. I could see my mom's extreme. I could see my dad's extreme. And growing up, I could also see like what I didn't want to be like as an adult.
Tired of stocks crashing and inflation eating your savings? Build real wealth with hard assets you can actually see, feel, and understand. You know I love hard assets that stand the test of time. That's why I'm excited to tell you about Parcels of Plenty. Parcels of Plenty offers affordable Arizona land primarily in Apache County that is great for the future homesteader, adventure seeker, or one who wants to save their hard-earned wealth in something they can touch. Starting with a low down payment, clear terms, fast recording, and a 90-day money-back guarantee, There's really no better way to invest in yourself and your legacy. Can you imagine only paying $7 per year in property taxes for an acre of land? Those are the types of Parcels of Plenty has. Talk about dirt cheap holding costs to preserve your wealth over time. No middlemen, no surprises, just transparent deals. Head to parcelsofplenty.com, find your parcel, send a message, and start building your hard asset portfolio now. Don't wait. Land is the ultimate hedge. I mean, I think one thing that keeps coming up, I mean, do you think that they're almost different like money languages influenced than like divorcing?
I mean, yeah, I think that, the thing that's interesting about money in general is that we all have this perception of a way that we want to manage it, or the way that, we all have our own relationship with money, and there's not necessarily a right or wrong relationship with it. It's just the way that it makes sense for you. And Jack, one of the things just in general, not just about money, but in general, what I have always found is that I sometimes someone will tell me something and I'll say, "Oh, well, that makes sense." Right? Like anytime I've noticed that anytime I say that makes sense, it's really an indication to me that if something makes sense to me, then it's probably a good strategy for me to deploy, or something for me to adopt in the world, because, you know, you're not going to do something that doesn't make sense to you. I think we can all agree with that. We're not going to do that. And we're only going to do things that make sense to us and that we understand. And so as a result of that, being able to see parents, especially for me, to see divorced parents and how they managed money, I was able to see, like, as I said, two different extremes, and I could navigate to the middle, right? And my grandparents, they had a different money language. Okay, so like my grandparents, which were my mom's parents, I spent a lot of time with them. They were obviously older, and as you get older, you get more money, right? Like you don't have those initial costs that you would have, is like the startup cost. Definitely as you get older, you get more money. You learn to manage it a little bit better. So I was able to see them and how they manage things, and they were somewhat of a balance. You know, they each had a job. My grandfather was a truck driver for Nabisco. My grandmother worked at a grocery store just in the deli, and they weren't rolling in dollars, but yet they had this consistency of what they did. They had a system. My grandmother, the company she worked for, the grocery store chain, they allowed her to buy stock. That was part of her savings. She whenever they would sell stock, she'd buy as much as she could buy. That was her retirement. Plus, she got a retirement. My grandfather was like, "Hey, yeah, that's how we're going to save money, but I have a pension, different time in the different time where pensions were prevalent." So, I think that your money story almost becomes this accumulation of what you see around you, the things that you like to see, or the pains, or the punishments, or whatever it is. You can navigate that, and then you can also maybe find a beacon that says, "Hey, this is a way forward that I want to go," and you become this composite of all of these different money stories around you.
Mm-hmm.
At least that's the way I feel like it is.
Yep. So, okay, and I didn't know this about you, but it seemed like you were pulled towards real estate actually, like longer before then. I mean, some people might know you from like the Land Geek and whatnot, and but it seems like you had gone at it time and time again, I guess, and this was like your fifth time.
Yeah.
Can you talk about some of the first four times
Yeah.
into real estate?
Yeah. You know, um, Probably as long as I can remember, I always wanted to be like an entrepreneur. I always wanted to work for myself. I've had that itch forever. And, trying to find the right business. I mean, I've tried so many different businesses, and I'm like, I don't really like this business, or nothing ever panned out. But I always had this interest in real estate. There was always this underlying interest, and I don't even know where that came from. I mean, I would hear stories from my relatives about, oh, during the Great Depression, during the Great Depression, the people that did well were the real estate investors. The people who owned real estate, they did well. And maybe that was part of my story too. I don't really know, but I always had this, there was always this fascination with real estate. And, so I always had something, but the first real exposure I had to real estate investing was Lonnie Scruggs. I'm sorry, not Lonnie Scruggs. Carlton Sheets. Remember Carlton Sheets, the no money down guy? He did these infomercials back in the late 90s or in the 90s where he's sitting on his, I don't know, pool deck by his pool in Florida, interviewing people who are buying properties with no money down. And yeah, yeah, he got me. Okay. And so I ordered it up, and you start going through his material back at the day back in the time, which is really, really good material. And the thing that he did is he was going after no money down houses. And so he'd say, hey, get the Sunday classified newspaper when all the ads were up there of all the stuff for sale. Get that, circle in, potential people phone for deals, tell them you don't have any money and get it for no money down. And I literally looked at that. I'm like, there's no way anybody would ever sell you a house with no money down. There's no way that anybody would ever, do this for you. And that did count as my first foray into real estate, because I did get on the phone. I did try, but I didn't have the confidence and the courage to go do that. Like it came down to confidence and courage, and I just didn't have it. And so I packed it up, ended up selling it years later on eBay, and, thought, not for me. And then, it didn't kill the itch, but then another one that happened was I started talking to some guys, and they're like, oh man, we can, you can, flip houses. Okay. Flip houses. And this was again, late 90s. Yeah, around 97. Man, just go get a house under contract that needs some work, get under contract, flip it to somebody with the signs out there that says we buy homes, make $5,000, something like that back in the day. And that sounded so easy. Sounds easy. And I went out and I got a house. Um, it, I was scared. I did not put under contract yet. And what I did was I called up another investor, and I said to him, hey, I'm interested in like flipping a home. I've got a home in mind, but before I get it under contract, I'd love for you to look at it. And if it works for you, then I'll get it under contract and then sell it to you and make a few $1,000s, whatever it is. I just want to learn this process and build some connections. And he's like, oh yeah, no problem, no problem. So he drives up. I meet him at the house. I have the key. I meet him at the house. The owners aren't there. And he drives up in his Jag. Okay. So he gets out of his Jag. I don't know. I'm like in a Ford Explorer. Okay. Like you talk about intimidation. He gets out of his Jag, Mr. Fancy here. He's like, show me what you got. So we walk through the house, and he's like, okay, yeah, this is a good one. I'll buy it from you for 47,000. You should offer them 45,000, maybe 44,000. Okay. So you make a few $1,000s. He's like, and I'll buy it from you. And I said, okay, cool. I leave the meeting. And again, this is like before the days of cell phones or whatever. I leave the meeting and I'm going back to my office, and I am excited as all can be, right? Like, oh man, I'm in love with this business. And I get to the office, I shut my door, I call the seller, and I tell him like, hey, sir, I'd like to put this under contract for $44,000. And he says to me, I'm sorry, I literally just signed the contract right now for 47,000. And I was like, what? To who? And he names the guy, and he names the Jaguar guy. And I'm like, what? And he's like, yeah. And I'm like, can I talk to him? Is he there now? He's like, yeah, he's right here in front of me right now. I'm like, can I talk to him? I'm like, dude, what are you doing? And he's like, what I'm doing is I just taught you a lesson. I said, well, what did you teach me? He said, don't show someone like myself a property like this that you don't have under contract. Grow a pair, put it under contract first, and then sell it. That's how you're going to learn. And I was
Hmm.
disgusted,
Yeah.
right? Like defeated, disgusted, uh, saddened, scared, all of that stuff. And then, when they meant, when you have that type of an experience and exposure in the world, you do start to believe maybe some self-doubt gets in, or maybe I'm just justifying it today, but that's what happened to me at least is I got scared and saddened and defeated and all the other words. And then I thought, I guess I don't have the the nerve, the courage to go put these things under contract if I don't think I'm going to be able to sell them. Okay. So, we go from there, and then the bug never left. It didn't leave. And then I came across this guy named Lonnie Scruggs, and Lonnie had this incredible system that just made so much sense to me. And what he did was he was buying mobile homes in a mobile home park, and he would go in there. And the thing about mobile homes, I know it's changed a little bit. It's probably the same logic today, but I haven't really followed it. But what he would do is he would go in there and he would find people who wanted to sell their mobile homes. And the thing about mobile homes in a mobile home park is that they are treated as vehicles. Banks treat them as vehicles. You cannot get a mortgage on them. If they were tied to land, absolutely, you can treat it as a mortgageable building. But in a mobile home park, it's treated as a personal chattel, and you can't get a mortgage on it. So you have to treat it as a like a personal loan, a car. So a lot of people who owned mobile homes at the time, they might want to sell their property, and they might go in there and they might ask $10,000, or at least that was Lonnie's experience, $10,000. And he would go in there and he would go through the house. And my favorite story of his is that he would go in with his wife. He called his wife his squirrel dog. Okay.
Okay.
She goes, and by the way, don't ever call your wife a squirrel dog unless she tells you it's okay. So she would go in there. He's talking to the seller, and he's like, okay, what do you want for the house? And she's like, $10,000. And meanwhile, his squirrel dog is walking through the house, going to the notorious weak spots in the home, the bathrooms, the door, maybe the kitchen by the sink, and she's shouting out, Lonnie, the floor is weak over here. She is purposely pinpointing all of the flaws. And each time she's pinpointing the flaws, you could see the seller's face just drop. Like, oh, there goes more money. Then it came to the close, and he would say, hey, listen, based on all these findings that we have, I can offer you, $2,000, 2,500. Well, they would take him up on his offer because that was probably the best deal that they would have had come along, because people that they were selling to probably didn't have $10,000. So Lonnie would buy it, they would move out, and literally on the same day that they're moving out, he's showing up with a for sale sign by owner, 200 down and 200 a month for whatever the months were, 36 months or whatever, and offering owner financing. And when I heard Lonnie tell this story and I read the book, I fell in love with that model because number one, it seemed low risk to me.
Mhm.
Okay. Now, remember, I had gone from this disaster of, a $45,000 deal uh, down to like, hey, okay, I got 2,500 bucks. I got $2,000. I can do this. Yeah, I can do this. Now my confidence is there. Okay. My confidence is there. I'm like doing it. I go out and I buy a unit for $2,000. Yeah, $2,000. I sold it. I flipped it for cash for $4,500. And I'm celebrating. I'm living the dream. I'm doing this thing. And then I bought another one, and this one turned out to be somewhat of a disaster. I mean, The guy that was buying it, you had your normal turnover. They'd go in there and they pay for a few months, and then you had to get them out of there. So you had to evict them. I never had to evict anybody, but I always had to chase them down for the money. And then there was so many nights where I'm going to like one of the guy's homes or to his job. He was a security guard. I'm chasing him down at 10 o'clock at night to get my $200, which was miserable. Why I did that? I don't know. I just did. I needed the $200, and I didn't want to resell it. I wanted him to live there. And so then he tells me one day he's going to pack up and leave, and then another guy moves in there, and this other guy is just basically I'm going to call him a con guy. I wrote about him in the book. He goes in there and he he doesn't he doesn't like what the community's doing. And next thing I know, he's on TV one night on the evening news talking about how there's arsenic in the water and all this other stuff, which is not true. So he gets evicted the very next day. I had to replace that and pay his bill. Finally, I get a buyer in there, and this guy is a rough dude, just, bossy kind of a guy. He's making his payments, but barely, is miserable. He's always complaining about something that he was responsible for with the home. Finally, one day he calls me up and he goes, "How much do I owe you?" And I was like, $6,500. Just get $6,500. He's like, "Be here at 6 p.m. and bring the title." So I show up at 6 p.m. with the title in hand. I notified my wife, like, "Hey, I, I will probably be home tonight. I don't really know, but I'm assuming I will be." Uh, so I get to the home and the guy starts counting out. Well, I'm sorry, when I got there, I get out of the car. There's the guy plus like four other guys. So there's five guys around me. And I'm walking up to the guy and I'm thinking, like, this does not end well, man. Like, they're about to lay out some cash for me and I'm going to get jumped, probably murdered here. So he says, "Do you have the title?" I go, "Yeah, I got the title." And he looks at one of the guys. He says, give him the money." So they start counting out hundreds. Okay. 1,000, 1,200. I lost count, Jack. I lost count, man. I'm like, whatever. 64, 65. It could have been 24 and 25. It didn't matter. I take the money, I wad it up, I put it in my pocket, I hand him the title. I'm like, "We good?" He's like, "Yeah, we're good." I start backing up to the car, like doing the whole look over my shoulder to make sure I'm not going to get jumped, but keeping these guys here. Hit the remote control on the car to unlock the door. I open the door. I hit, boom, lock the door, start the car. I get out of there. And as I'm driving home, I realize, like, I cannot do this. I cannot do any more of these because you cannot get rich getting dead. Can't do it. So that was my last kind of mobile home piece. And, each time that I went through this process, there was a learning curve to it, but there was also some wall that you're going to hit that literally maybe stopped me from achieving the larger scale growth that I desired. And then I did something with tax lien certificates that was much safer because I wasn't, trying to collect money. The state was giving me money or the counties were giving me money, repaying me. So that was somewhat easier, a little bit more competitive. And then, as we fast forward to my fifth foray in real estate, the one that you know me from, which is land, what happened was I'm working my corporate job. I've been there for 10 years. I'm working for a Fortune 300 company, and I'm living the dream, man. I'm rising through the ranks of the company like somebody that's ambitious like myself would want. I'm rising up. I achieved the dream, vice president of this company. And I was content with it. I was okay. I wasn't necessarily like, the money was good, the security was good, I enjoyed the work, but I still wanted that thing to like work for myself. And then we were being relocated for this VP job. I was in a rental house that the company was paying for. And I turn on CNBC one day and there's Jim Cramer. And he is putting the CEO of the company on his CEO wall of shame. Now, there's a lot of uh, political stuff I could tell you behind the scenes about that, but basically, they wanted they meaning the institutional investors wanted this guy out. They throw him on the wall of shame. Magically, 2 weeks later, he resigns for personal reasons. But then I realized, like, holy cow, I'm in trouble here because even though that CEO wasn't my direct boss, it was my boss's boss. And I could see what was going to happen. You could see, like, okay, my boss is going to be gone. I'm going to get a new boss. They're probably going to layer people in there. That's just the way that it works. I'm not guaranteed a path here. And then I started looking for, okay, what is my exit here? And I knew I wanted to be real estate. And that's where I found land. And that's kind of what I did. And I connected with it. And it was this connection. It was this true connection of all of the other experiences that I had. It was this experience of I understood owner financing from what I did with mobile home parks, mobile homes in a park. It was understanding delinquent taxes because that's who we were marketing to at the time, as people who had delinquent taxes. So I understood that whole mindset. And I understood that because of the work that I did with owner financing. I'm sorry, of the tax liens. So I understood all of these different elements and they just kind of came together. And that allowed me to basically build my exit to get out of the corporate job by the time they literally outsourced my entire department. So when that happened, I had built the income that I needed to escape simply by kind of just working this model and then knowing, like, okay, this is it. Like, I have to make this one work. The others, I didn't necessarily have to make it work, but this time I had that true burning desire and, like, I cannot let this one fail.
Mm-hmm. There was a part in the book, I might be getting the timeline a little mixed up, but I think you were in Oklahoma, you're in a park.
Mhm.
It's kind of like a decision time. And I mean, listening to your story now about like maybe like the confidence component, um, I mean, looking and you were, I think you were kind of discussing, should I just get another job? But you were kind of thinking it's kind of like a trap. Can you kind
Yeah.
of talk through
Yeah.
that type of mentality?
Yeah. I think that what happened, dear Jack, and what the story basically goes that I was in Oklahoma for work. I was having a rough day at work. The corporate gig was rough, and all I wanted was the side hustle to kind of be the main hustle, right? Like I was done. I could see the writing on the wall. I didn't. I really was not enjoying the work at the time, nor was I enjoying my boss. But at the same time, my new boss. But at the same time, what was happening was it wasn't ready for me to go and jump the side hustle yet. Jump to the side hustle. And so I'm there. I'm defeated. And look, I think that we all have moments where we have this inner critic troll that gets in our ear, in our head, and convinces us that maybe we shouldn't be doing something. I mean, I think everybody, whether they admit or not, has that. And I can point to you various stories, but of people that you would be like, wow, they had that. But the whole thing is that it is so real. And in this given moment of weakness, I had like self doubt and pity and, a boohoo session for me. And I went to this park. It was hot as can be, man. It was like July. Winds were blowing, I think, 20 miles an hour or something. It was hot. Okay. It was bad. And I'm like dying out here at this park, but at the same time, I was debating, okay, well, what are my options? I'm ready to be done with this corporate gig today. I'm done. Okay. So option one is I could go and get another job. And if I did that, then ultimately what's going to happen is I'm going to have to put this side hustle on hold because there's no way I can manage a new job and coming up this to speed and all this other stuff and go chase the dream. It would be next to impossible. And Jack, I see that all the time, man. I see it whether it's real estate investing, someone starts a business, life gets in the way, or a decision from their corporate job gets in the way, and then they have to put that dream on hold for yet another time. And so you pause your dreams as opposed to continuing to chase them. And I think that at the time, you know, what I was feeling at the time was, hey, you know, if I go get another job, like if I lost my job tomorrow, I'm gonna have to go get another job. But if I go get another job, then I'm gonna have a little bit more time of security. Whereas if I lost my job tomorrow, the side hustle is not going to be able to replace it. So I'm exposed there, right? And as I'm walking around the park, I'm kind of thinking, and I'm like, I don't want to give up on my dreams. I've given up too many times. I'm done giving up on it. This is the time, and I got to figure this thing out. But what was happening with my side hustle, with my investing gig, is that I was doing it for 9 months, and mentally, I felt like I should be further along than what I really was. I mean, mentally, I felt like, man, I should be crushing it, or I should be making more money the way that I am, like where I am right now, or I'm feeling behind. So then what I was doing is I was putting pressure on myself that was just an artificial time horizon. I was putting pressure on myself that was not fair. I needed to give the business more time, but I also felt overwhelmed, right? I felt completely overwhelmed about, hey, there's so much to do. There's so many things to do in a business. So many possible things that you can work on today. I mean, that was 10 years ago, Jack. Today, I think it's even worse because today there's just so much FOMO about AI or automation or, open claw, whatever it is, right? There's like all this stuff, and there's no way that any one person can keep up with all of the changes, and then they feel overwhelmed. Back then, it was the same way, and I felt like I was getting left behind, that I was going to miss the boat. And I went to a restaurant, and as I'm thinking about this, I'm like, you know what? There is a way I can do this. There's a way I can do this. And what I need to do is I need to map out my entire business end to end. I call it swim laning the business. And I'm just a big fan of this tool. I don't have one here, but look, I got right in front of me. If you're watching this on YouTube, I got like this big pad. I love these big pads. Okay. And essentially what this allows me to do is think about a playbook that a coach might have. I want to run the plays. I want to see how work moves through my organization as a whole. I want to see like what I'm responsible for or what other people are responsible for. So I map this thing out. I swim lane the entire business from start to finish. And I did that at dinner, and I looked down at this map and I realized, well, the problem is that I'm not letting go of stuff. The problem is that everything still comes to me, whether that's control issue or maybe it was by design. But, I had the opportunity, because I had assistants working with me, to say, this doesn't need me anymore. How do I shift it away from me? And what happened was, when I started shifting work away from me, almost instantly, it was like a switch went on, because all of a sudden I realized, like, I am the bottleneck here, right? The reason that I'm not buying more properties is because I'm the one sitting on approving the due diligence. The reason that I'm not buying or selling more is because I'm the one that's writing the ads. And then I'm the one approving the ads when I gave it to somebody else, right? So the more of those approvals that you have, or the more of those things that your business is waiting on you, that's a trap. I call it the control trap, right? Like, that control trap is there, and it's going to limit your ability to grow your business, because you can only process so much. And that was really the like a revelation for me. And once I let go of that, and I said, hey, you know what? Like, I've managed a team that's global. I understand what it's like to let go of stuff. I understand like what it's like to have people out in the world responsible for things that ultimately you're responsible for, but they're making decisions because that's the way it was in my job, right? Like I had a team across the globe that at the end of the day, I was responsible for their decisions, but yet I couldn't control their decisions. So I said, you know what? What if I just gave away the control? And when I did, the business almost accelerated overnight. And it really was just that one micro adjustment.
I think a lot of people listening might be starting out in their journey and maybe they don't even have people working for them. I'd like to get into your investor priority pyramid a little bit and maybe I like the analogy with the Maslow hierarchy of needs. So maybe you could give us a flavor of what that's all about.
Yeah. So look, we all know what Maslow is all about, right? Maslow goes back. I mean, we learned about him back in school. We may or may not have paid attention to it, but at the end of the day, Maslow has his five hierarchy of needs, and it's physiological. We have to be able to use the restroom, sleep, eat, okay, breathe oxygen. Those are at the base level, and nothing else happens when we have a physiological need. If I had no oxygen right now, you and I wouldn't be talking, right? If I had to use the restroom right now, I would run away from this call and be like, I can't stay here. I have to go. See, what I'm doing here is at a higher level than that physiological need. Okay. Well, then the next level up from that is safety. So nothing will happen if, as long as my physiological needs are met, then I can worry about my safety. As long as I feel safe, and that's financial security and also personal security, as long as I'm feeling safe, then I can go ahead and move up to the next level. Well, the next level, as we look at the next level, is social. I can be social and interact with other people. I can build relationships. I can build, emotional relationships, friendships. I can hang out with people. I can hang out with you. You and I can just talk about whatever because, well, my safety's met and so is my physiological needs. But then once I have enough social needs too, well, then I can work on my self-esteem. And then the last very top category up there is self-actualization. So when you think about that pyramid, I can't work on becoming who I really meant to be, self-actualization, until all of the other needs are met. And again, right now you could argue that, hey, you're working in level 4, level 5, this conversation. But I'm telling you, man, if somebody walked in the room right now and threatened my safety, we're over. That it's over. I'm going to drop back down to where the lowest level need is. Now let's apply that to our businesses, whether it's a real estate business or any other business. Think about the same Maslow's hierarchy of needs. You have 5 levels. Okay. The lowest level is deal flow. Okay. The lowest level of any business, which is going to be the oxygen of the business, is cash. Okay. Well, what generates cash in a real estate investing business? Well, raising capital from people, having capital to go do the deal. That's one of them. Being able to buy real estate or sell that real estate, that produces cash for the business. If the business does not have a means of generating oxygen, cash, well, then you have no business, right? But if you have enough oxygen, if you have enough deal flow, if you have enough sales, well, now you have to look at, okay, how do I protect the profits that are coming in? Okay, so the next level up is profit. So we want to focus first on deal flow and oxygen coming into the business. And then we need to manage the next component, which is the profits. And once we have enough profits to sustain the very next level, the next level is order. And the thing about order, it's all about efficiencies. It's about taking out waste from the business. It's about making sure that you're not the bottleneck within the organization. It's about making sure that the organization can run in the most efficient way. However, think about this one for a second. So many times people start a business. I see this all the time in real estate. They start a business, and what they do is they go out and they go buy all these tools, right? Like, oh, I need all these software. Oh, Scott's automating his business. Oh, I need all this AI to keep up with Scott. Well, that that's the order level. So people try to build the business first at the order level, but they skip over the basic, which is deal flow. They're not focusing on what do I need to do to get the deals and the cash flowing in. That then means I need the software to support it. They set up the software first. See, it's the wrong order, right? And when you have things that are in the wrong order, your business is going to struggle. And again, it doesn't matter what business you're in, it's going to struggle when you're in the wrong order. Now, the last two layers of the top levels of the investor priority pyramid is impact and legacy. So let's talk about these. You see, the bottom three levels that I just talked about, that is the getting stage. That's where you're getting what you need to survive and to grow the business and to sustain that business. When you go to the top two, now you're in the giving stage, because see, the top two is not about you and your needs anymore. It's about making a transformation within your team, within your community, but also on building a legacy. What's your legacy going to look like? And I talk to a lot of real estate investors, and I say, hey, what happens to all your properties when you pass away? And they'll say, I don't know, it goes to my family. Oh. And some families, they might continue to operate the business. Other families are just going to say, sell it. Just sell everything that dad built up or mom built up, sell it all. And it's unfortunate, because what was missed is the true opportunity to create a legacy that is an asset that is sellable, that is continuable. And so really what that means is that it means that if you're going to go that route, what more can you do to build this company that's more than just, hey, let me meet some needs today?
Mm-hmm. Could you also touch on, you brought up this idea of people playing like a finite game versus an infinite game. And I
Yeah.
think that's kind of like similar idea.
Yeah. So yeah, I love that. I love that concept. It was a book originally written some time ago. Simon Sinek took it and modified it, if you will, but it's the infinite versus finite game. And if you think about the way that most people think about really anything, is they think like, okay, well, there's a time in which I lose, or there's a time in which I'm losing. But really, if you think about things in an infinite strategy, there is no winning or there's no losing, right? There's no way of doing that. So let me give you an example. If you were to go out and start a business today and you were to compare it to mine, well, then you might look at mine and say, well, man, Scott's winning and I'm not going to be able to catch up. But how do we judge success? How are you going to judge if I'm better than my company's better than yours or not? Like it's some artificial metric that's put out there. So you think about all these companies that are out there today, and you've seen this, like number one in customer service by JD Powers. Okay, well, that's cool, but JD Powers completely made that thing up. And just because JD Powers says that you're number one in customer service, it doesn't really necessarily mean that you truly are number one in customer service. And nobody even says that that is the benchmark in which we're competing against. We didn't all agree to go play by that rule. So think about this one for a second. A finite game is any sport, any game in which there's rules. Okay, there's rules, there's a time horizon, there's a start, there's a finish. Any game, any sport, football, you pick it. You can make up a finite game just in your front yard. We did it as kids. Like, hey, I'm going to play wiffle ball and we're going to make up the rules. And oh, that's not the rules. Well, let's create the rules right now. So we created the rules on the fly. We made up our own games. Well, that's an infinite game, because there's a beginning and an end, and you know who wins. And we all agree to the rules, and we all agree to how you're going to judge if somebody won or not. Business and life in general isn't like that. It's a finite game. There is no beginning and end in terms of the rules or the score or anything else like that. So I think that a lot of times what happens is we begin to think about, well, am I winning? Well, that depends. That depends on how you're keeping score versus anybody else. And then we start to feel negative about our situation. Maybe we feel like we're losing. Again, who came up with the scoring system? Nobody. It's all in your head, right? And ultimately, you can join any game that you want whenever you want, and you can play by whatever rules you want to play by. And that's the whole concept, that the way that I interpret it is that I can build the game to be whatever I want it to be. I can play the game that I want to play as long as I'm not violating, state and local laws or federal laws or something. There's nothing stopping you.
So last thing on the book. So while our listeners are playing their game and they identify their weakest link, you bring up this framework you call Acre.
Mhm.
Can you give us a flavor of that framework?
Yeah, yeah. So with it, when it comes to Acre, really what you're doing is, to me, Acre is a repeatable process in which you can run things through to go in there and begin to uh, basically build systems that work for you. Okay, so when you think about Acre, you've probably heard about OKRs. Basically OKR is another way of thinking about this. And basically what it becomes is, it becomes a repeatable pattern of working through the the process. So we want to start by accumulating or identifying the objective, right? So like, what's the objective of this tactic that we're going to go do? That's the A. Articulate the objective. Okay. So I want to do whatever, right? Like, we want to win this game, or we want to achieve this milestone. We want to look at that. Okay. The C is, we want to go out and we want to collect the metrics. Okay. How are we going to know if we're winning or losing? Remember, the winning or losing is going to come from your own internal interpretation of the game. So let me give an example. Let's just say that I went out there and I said, "Hey, I want to execute on this tactic, and I'm going to articulate that tactic, whatever it is. I'm going to go do this." We're going to determine, how is it that we're going to measure success? How are we going to measure success? Well, we're going to do that by looking at our monthly income growth, our customer service growth, whatever the metric is that you want to use. C, collect the metric. Okay. R for acre is rhythm. How often are we looking at this number? The temptation is to look at something every single day, but that doesn't really do you any good. Normally, it just creates more stress. You're a podcaster. If you went out there and you looked at all of your downloads every single day, it like, you would miss the growth, right? Like, you'd be like, oh man, that number again. But if you stepped far back and you only looked at it once a month, and you looked at your subscriber count or your downloads for the month, you might be more surprised and celebrate the win, as opposed to look at it every single day. So rhythm, what rhythm are we going to use to look at this metric that we just identified? And then the E is really the evolution, right? Like, we want to not just look at the number and say yay or nay. What we want to do is, we want to look at that metric as it comes in during our rhythm and say, wait a minute, did the strategy that we deploy work? Did our tactic work? And if not, we need to go back to the drawing board and work on that piece to refine it, to get better at it, right? And so Acre is just this mental model that I use in order to walk through the tactics or the strategies that we're deploying, and saying everything starts with this acre. And we want to map that out. We want to lay it out. And then from there, we want to go out. And that's how we're going to kind of execute on the tactic that we've identified.
Awesome. Yeah, I thoroughly enjoyed your book, Scott Todd. It's going to be on my desk as reference, I'm sure, for many years to come. So while we're winding down, I like to ask, my final question is always, what is the worst and best personal finance advice you've heard?
Let's see. Worst and best financial advice that I've heard. I would say that I'll start off with the best advice I ever heard. I think that the best advice is really, and it actually comes from um, so many people, but I think that the person who's articulated this really, really great here recently is Mike Michalowicz, in his new book, The Money Habit. And essentially, if you think about, if you're familiar with his book, Profit First,
Mhm.
ultimately it's about, hey, having a system in which you are, whether you're saving money or you're, spending money, it comes back down to a system. If you don't have a system, then you're in trouble, right? And I think that I think that that's probably the best advice I ever heard is, hey, create a financial system that works for you, that makes sense for you, as we started this conversation about, right? I think that the worst mistake that I hear or have heard is the concept of, and I'm not saying it's wrong in general. I'm saying it's not necessarily right for me, is people will say, oh, well, um, cut your expenses, cut your expenses. And the thing about expenses, especially I think in business, is that there are certain expenses that you can cut and you should be cutting. But I think that you can't just accept a blanket mindset of, I'm going to cut everything or I'm going to use nothing. I think that what you have to understand is that every dollar that you deploy, especially in business, needs to have a predetermined ROI. Okay. And I think that the bad advice is just cut things. And it's bad because you're not taking into consideration the true cost, which is really everything in your business is an investment. Okay. It's not about cutting people. It's about, hey, if I'm investing in people, then I need a return on that investment. If I'm deploying money for a software, I need a return on the investment. And people don't always think that way, right? Like they think, oh man, I just got to pay for all these software tools. Well, that's true, but you also need some return on investment, right? And so the bad advice being just cut everything. Well, cut the things that aren't giving you a return on your investment. They kind of shortchanged it on that part.
Cool. That's the wise advice. So once again, we had Scott Todd on for Fix This Next. Scott, why don't you tell people, the listeners, where they can go get the book, where they can go learn more about you or get in touch with you?
So, look, you can get the book anywhere books are sold. Fix This Next for real estate investors. Uh, Always happy to connect with each of you, and you can do so at scotttodd.net. But I'll tell you what, if you wanted to see where you fall on the investor priority pyramid, and you just want to take a quick 25 yes or no question, and it's going to tell you what your biggest core value is, head over to Fix This Next. It's a long one. I'll do it again. Fix This Next for realestateinvestors.com. You head over there and you can, for free, you take an assessment. It takes you less than 5 minutes, and it will tell you the thing that you should be working on in your business.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much, Scott, and we'll have links to those in the show notes.
Awesome, Jack. Thank you.